Now we'll call on the Menayel and the Mashpia from Mochen Rav Majesky, who's going to address us in English.
When it comes to the Yontif of Hey Tevis, the Dan Notzach, there are a lot of different aspects to Hey Tevis in terms of what is the Simcha and what is the Yontif and what it means. On one hand, without going into understanding what's behind the Svarim, why is it so important, why it had to be this way, and why was it so terrible that they were taken away, without understanding the details, just the mere fact that this was something that gave the Rebbe such agmas nefesh, something which I don't think Chassidim ever witnessed with anything else. And then the Sfarim will return to the Rebbe. This in itself was enough of a reason for the simcha, for the celebration, without B'chlal knowing what else is involved. Those who remember the Sichos, when the Rebbe spoke about the Sfarim, how the Rebbe spoke about it, the pain and the anguish that we all saw. We heard Sichos from the Rebbe about Mihu Yehudi. We heard Sichos from the Rebbe about giving back Shtachim, Rachmana Litzlan, and Eretz Yisrael. Sichos on various subjects that the Rebbe spoke with Agmas Nefesh, but nothing compared to when the Rebbe spoke about the Svarim. And when it's clear to everyone how much this touched the Rebbe to the core. And in one Fabrengen, whoever was there remembers how at the time Rashag walked over to the Rebbe middle of a Fabrengen while there was singing going on. Rashag, we know, had the schus that he did everything for the Rebbe, that the Svarim should be returned. I don't know what he said, but certainly it was about this subject. And he walked over to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was answering him, and no one could hear what the Rebbe was saying, but what we could see was the Agmas Nefesh. And I don't think we ever saw something like this where the Rebbe was physically shaking as he was talking. Things which we did not see by Mi Yehudi Sichos, by Shtachim Sichos. And this was a different kind of Agmas Nefesh. And Chassidim are ready to do everything and anything to prevent the Rebbe from having Agmas Nefesh. Like we find in that famous story with the Rebbetzin Dvar Leah. When she came to the Bezdin of Chassidim, she didn't tell them why she's coming to them. She didn't tell them yet what happened. And she began to tell them that there's something going on and that she wants them to give an oath that they're going to do what she's going to ask them to do. And as she was talking, and the Chassidim realized that something is happening, they knew that there was a lot of pain and anguish going on. And when she spoke and burst out crying, they realized there's more going on. And it says that one of the Chassidim stood up and he said, "Tell us what's happening. Tell us what we can do for the Rebbe. And we're ready to go in fire and in water and give our lives up for the Rebbe." This is the normal feeling of a chassid. And therefore, if there was Agmas Nefesh, and then Hey Tevis was the ruling that took away that Agmas Nefesh, that alone was a reason, enough of a reason for the Simcha. And again, everyone can testify that the Simcha by Chassidim in the time of Hey Teves was something which was Pirit Kol HaGedorim. It was totally different than anything else. the celebration, the joyous rejoicing and the singing and the dancing, which continued for 7 consecutive days. And at that time, everybody said that the feeling was there was dancing and singing without effort. Everybody's feet was just naturally carrying them. People were up late into the night, bringing every single night, and it was just effortless. It was just natural because the simcha overtook everyone. And the main nikud of the simcha at that point was, without knowing the details, that something which touched the Rebbe to such a point, Baruch Hashem, this was taken away, and the Rebbe has what he wanted, and that was the biggest simcha by Chassidim, that alone. Of course, there's another nekuda, the Svarim. Like the Rebbe says in the Sichos, this was an etzachen for the Svarim, that these Svarim, which belong in the Rebbe's library, and they belong by the Rebbe in 770, were taken away from its place, and therefore, there's something that these Svarim have to accomplish, and if they're not in the place where they're supposed to be, they're not able to accomplish that. And halachas kama v'kama, from what we see, that by a Rebbe, everything that goes on by a Rebbe is so precise, and everything has a purpose, and everything has a meaning to its most minute detail. Because everything by a Rebbe is connected to L'mayla. As is a famous story, where there was, the Rebbe Rashab was sitting by a table, was the table, I think of the Rebbe Marash, and there was someone sitting next to him, and he moved an ashtray on the table. Either Rebbe Rashab or the Rebbe Marash, and he moved the ashtray back to where it was. And the lady said that everything that's on the table is precisely where it's supposed to be, and it's mechuven to inyanim l'mayla, and how could someone come along and move the ashtray from this spot to another spot? Or the famous story with the Baal Shem Tov, where he gave somebody an unusual bracha for arichas yomim. Why? Because he didn't move his slippers that he put down near the bed from one spot to another spot. So you're talking about moving an ashtray, or moving slippers, that bepashtas, because every detail by a Rebbe is mechuven to l'mayla, and has so much more connected to it, that even that is significant. Alachas kama v'kama, when you talk about the Svarim, and the library of the Rabbeim, to be moved away from its place, Rahman al-Islam, and wanting to do what they wanted to do. As the Rebbe said then, also a language which is very unusual, that everyone should know. Whoever has a sefer in his hand from those Svarim, these were words that were very unusual words. And I remember hearing then that after the court case, during the court case, there were those people that were traveling to individuals who bought the Svarim to get it back, and some of them agreed right away to give it back, and some didn't. They wanted a lot of money for it. It was a business for them. They didn't want to respect the Svarim. And to some people, what they did, they just played the Rebbe's Sicha, where they heard the word, the Bomba, that Sicha, and they immediately said, Gesundheit, hey, take the Svarim, and Laz Mitzaru. Because it's not in its right place. There's another nekuda that the Rebbe brought out, that this court case wasn't an ordinary court case. The whole court case was based on the inyan of that the Yakov Avinu loy mes. The Rebbe said that the basis that the Svarim belong here, and this person who claims that it's his because he's a relative and he has the schusim to inherit, the Rebbe said there's no inheritance because the Rebbe is alive. How was this presented in court? In court, it was presented that a Rebbe is not an individual, not someone who has anything personal. The Rebbe and the Chassidim are one. And as the famous word that the Rebbetzin said then, when they asked her, during your father's lifetime, who did the Svarim belong to? Did they belong to your father, or the Chassidim considered that it belonged to them? And the Rebbetzin answered that the Svarim and the Rebbe belonged to the Chassidim. And that was the Nekuda. the way it's presented in court, that Lubavitch as a movement is alive and continues, and that's what this forum belonged to. But the Rebbe in his Sichos, Yud Beis Tammuz, Tavshin Mem Hey, the Rebbe explained, this is the way it's explained outwardly. But inwardly, and Pnimius, the emes is as Yakov Avinu lo emes. And like the Gemara says, Sabdu Sabdayu, Chantu Chantayu, Kovru Kovrayu. What was the purpose in it? Vibad lo emes. And the Gemara concludes that it's only because they thought so. To them it appeared that way. But in reality, Yakov Avinu lo emes. And that's why there's no room for inheritance, and the Sfarim belong to the Rebbe. So the Rebbe said that once the judge ruled here in this courtroom, in this system of a secular courtroom, that the Sfarim belong to the Rebbe, basically that ruling is that the world and the Gashmizdika perspective agrees that Yaakov Avinu lo emes. As we know, the Rebbe then said, Shabbos Pashas Vayigash, right after Hey Tevis, that one of the things we learn from this story, that if people say that Chontu Chontayu and Kovru Kovrayu, we now see that we can go out to the world and we can say that Yaakov Avinu lo emes, because the world is ready to listen to that. So that was another amazing thing that the court ruled and recognized the Metzias Amiti Al Pi Torah that Yaakov lo emes. But in addition to all that, if we look into the Sicha of Vayigash Tavshin Mem Zayin, we see that in addition to all these things, the Ikar Zikir Inyan is that this was something in connection to Mashiach, and it's very clear that on that day, Hey Teves Tov Shin Mem Zayin, it was a turning point in the whole process of Bias Mashiach. In that Sicha, the Rebbe says that on this day, B'yom HaShlishi, Shulchvo B'Kitev, Hey Tevis, on this day, Maschil Zman Chodosh, it's the beginning of a new era, connected to the Beis HaMikdash HaOsid and Geula Asida, David Abdi Nasi Lem Leilam, David Malka Mashiach. And the Rebbe explains, after the Avodah of Rabbi Seinu Nisienu of 6 generations of Avodah, Shei Shonim Tizra Sadecha, V'Shei Shonim Tizra Karmecha, that they were cultivating Ilona the Chaya of Chassidus. Our generation, the Rebbe said, is the 7th generation, and now the only thing that's left is to bring down the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi through Mashiach Tzidkenu. These oisias were new oisias that the Rebbe said then and didn't say this before. We know that in Basi Legani, the Rebbe said we're now in the Der HaShvi. This is the generation to bring the Shekhinah down. But in all the 36 years, from Basi Legani Tavshin Yud Aleph until this Sicha, how many times do we find that the Rebbe should be speaking about the fact that we're in Der HaShvi, and this is the generation of Geula? Here's where the Rebbe said it, after 36 years. And after this, we find it constantly repeated and reiterated again and again. This is the last generation of Galus, and this is the first generation of Geula. And the Rebbe concludes in the Sicha that we should announce and publicize that we now find ourselves b'yameinu ela nimtzoim bizman u'mokem miyuchid asher lo noisar boi ela inyan echad v'yachid. There's only one single thing left. B'chayev adam leime b'loshen Rabbi. What's the one single thing left? Imdu hochen kulchem. Everyone should be ready for binyan beis hamikdash ha'asid v'biyas David Malka Mashiach. If one still has a doubt whether these words were different and unprecedented and something unusual, we can see from what the Rebbe himself said, that after the Rebbe said these words, it's in the Bilti Muga, the Hisvadius of Tavshim Emzayim Vayigash, where the Rebbe says like this: someone could come along and say such words that there's nothing else left except for bringing down the Beis HaMikdash are wilderei, that's wild to speak like that. That in all the zmanim, and all the generations preceding our generation, it was never spoken. How could you suddenly speak such words? And how will the world react to such words? In other words, the Rebbe is testifying that the words he just said is new, it's never been said before, and it raises the question, how will the world react? And what does the Rebbe answer? First of all, you don't have to become nispal from the world, because being that it's emes, apiteres emes, you could say this openly and begoli. But it's much more than that. You don't have to be worried because the situation today is such that the world is all ready to be makabel. All we have to do is come and say it. So the Rebbe is testifying that on Hey Tevis, Tovshim Mem Zayin, we entered a new tkufa, a new time, and the Rebbe is saying that the word that he's using and the language that he's speaking is something which was never spoken before, that everything is already to the extent there's nothing left to do except to bring Mashiach, and this was Hey Tevis Mem Zayin. And if we look at what followed, we see how slowly but surely the Rebbe started to come out more open. Just a few months later was the famous Sikha of Purim Mem Zayin, where the Rebbe spoke about Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach. And even though the Rebbe spoke about Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach before, but the Rebbe never spoke so openly as Purim Mem Zayin, that why is it now? Because this is one of the inyanim of Melech HaMashiach, to be mashpia on the Ummah Ha'olam that they should keep their Sheva Mitzvahs. And then later that year, before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the Rebbe came out again with a very sharp sikha that enough is not being done to publicize that the Bias Mashiach is imminent. Tavshim Memches, the Rebbe says that Chavei Shvat Tavshim Memches was a new tkufa in the process of Mashiach, equal to Yud Shvat and Yud Aleph Shvat, Tavshin Yud Aleph. Memches, that's when the Rebbe spoke about the Achraz of Yechi HaMelech, that now the time has come to say Yechi HaMelech, and through this you bring this galus of the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach in the Sikh of Tavshin Memches Beis Nisan. Tavshin Memtes, by this time we already saw the changes in Russia with the communist countries, that they began to collapse. It didn't happen yet, but it started to happen, that communism was falling, and finally in Tavshin Nun is when the changes started to really take place. Tavshin Nun was the announcement of the Yalkut Shemay Negiz Mangulatzchem, the Nun Aleph, Nun Beis, and all the Sikhs. And we see clearly that Hey Tevis Tavshin Mem Zayin was a turning point in this whole process as a result of the Svarim. Which means that the fact that the Rebbe received the Svarim back in 770, and there was the Don Natzach, that brought in a whole new dimension of the Malchus of the Rebbe as Melech HaMashiach. And therefore, just like then, we saw the Nitzochen came through the Dan Natzach. Many people don't know, those who weren't around then, that the Nigun, the Dan Natzach, is not something that we began to sing. We began to sing it after Hey Tevis. The Dan Natzach, we sang this way before Hey Tevis. And why did Chassidim sing the Dan Natzach? The reason was because the Rebbe trains us that we have to think positive, trach gut vet zayin gut. We have to approach everything lechatchila riber. So if we say the Dan Natzach and we sing the Dan Natzach, vet zayin the Dan Natzach. And there was an amazing sikha that the Rebbe gave. It was Pashas Kedoshim, and the Rebbe brought a medrash. Chassidim, when they made the nigun, had no idea there was such a medrash. The Rebbe brought a medrash where the medrash says that when you shout the Dan Natzach, it brings the tzochen. The Rebbe told a story. There was a Tana that he was sitting and learning near a well, and suddenly a ruach, a certain klippa, appeared to him, and he said to him that all these years I've been here, and your community, the men and the women, come here all the time. They come here by day, they come here by night, and they don't bother them. So in other words, even though this was a spirit, but he was a good guy, a Kenim Ish Gechepet. But you should know that now there's another Ruach coming here, and he's a bad one, and he wants to hurt people. So the Tana said to him, so what can we do? And he answered, tomorrow morning at the break of dawn, tell all the people in the town to come to this spot, and they should come with shovels, with sticks, with tools, and they should all come at the break of dawn and wait here until they see the water moving. Once they see the water moving, they should begin shouting, it says in the Medrash, Didan Notzach, and make noise with their sticks and tools, and they shouldn't walk away until they'll see a drop of blood in the water. And the next day, Yitzhak went back to the town, he told them what to do, and they came back the next morning at the break of dawn, they waited and they saw the water move, and they began to shout, Didan Notzach, Didan Notzach, and then they saw later a drop of blood, which meant that this power was destroyed, and it was over. So the Rebbe said, we see from here, they're just shouting, Didan Notzach, brings the Nitzachim. So the same as now, Hey Teves is a koyach in the inyan of all the Avodah that we need to do for bringing this galus of the Rebbe, Melech HaMashiach. And the way to do it is through Didan Notzach, not to focus and not to get lost on things that are happening that are negative, but to be focused on the Rebbe's haftacha, that it gives man gulaschem, and la'alta the geula, and that everything that's happening in the world is part of the process of geula. Some things we understand, some things we don't, and we have to just shout and say, Didan Notzach, and do everything we can, Arobring Mashiach Mapel, and we'll be zeicher to have tonight, take of Yad Mamish, the Nitzachon Amiti, this galus of the Rebbe, Melech HaMashiach, and leaders that have galus, take of Yad Mamish.